Sarah Lopez sat on a cold wooden bench just outside the courtroom. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her fingers twisting together without her noticing. She wore a clean gray blazer and dark jeans. Her black hair was pulled back into a low bun. Her shoes were scuffed, but she had polished them the night before. She had arrived early even before the clerk unlocked the courtroom doors. She always showed up early. That was something the army taught her. Show up early, be ready, never show fear. But today felt different. Today her heart pounded harder than it ever had on duty. She glanced at the man sitting across the hall. Her ex-husband Rick leaned back in his chair, checking his phone. He didn't look nervous. He had a lazy smile on his face, like he already knew what the judge was going to say. Sarah turned her eyes away. She didn't want to see that smile. A small photo peeked out from her purse. She reached in and pulled it out carefully. It was a school picture of her son Danny. His bright eyes and wide grin made her chest tighten. She kissed the corner of the picture and slid it back in. She had promised him she would always protect him, no matter what, even if the fight was in a courtroom instead of a war zone. It had been 4 years since Rick walked out. Danny was just a toddler then. At first Rick called sometimes. Then the calls stopped. He missed birthdays. He didn't pay support. Now suddenly he wanted shared custody. He just wants to look good, Sarah had told her lawyer. He doesn't even know what Danny's favorite color is. Her lawyer agreed, but they both knew the truth. Some judges didn't always care about the details. Sometimes they only saw what they wanted to see. And Sarah knew what she looked like to people like that. A tired single mother, working 2 jobs, always in a rush, no father in sight. They didn't see the late-night homework help, the skipped meals to afford school supplies, or the stories she read to Danny every night, even when she was exhausted. They didn't see the uniform folded neatly in her closet, or the medals in a box under her bed. The courtroom doors finally opened. Her heart jumped. She stood up slowly and walked in, her steps firm. Rick followed behind her. Inside, the courtroom was quiet. The judge sat at the front, flipping through a file. He looked old with gray hair and glasses that slid down his nose. Sarah stood straight as the judge looked up. He glanced at her, then at Rick. His eyes didn't linger on her long. "All right," the judge said with a sigh. "Let's get this started." Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of papers shuffling and shoes tapping against the floor. Sarah stood beside her lawyer at the front. She held her chin high, but inside her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. The judge looked down at the file in front of him. He didn't smile. His tone was dry as he said, "So this is a custody case. Mr. Rick Thomas and Miss Sarah Lopez. 1 child, 6 years old." Rick nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm the father." The judge looked over the papers again and raised an eyebrow. "And Miss Lopez, you're the mother. Single, I see?" "Yes, sir," Sarah answered calmly. The judge leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Working 2 jobs, struggling financially, living in a small apartment." He glanced at Sarah but not in a kind way. "And you're asking for full custody?" Sarah's lawyer spoke up. "Yes, Your Honor, Miss Lopez has been the child's sole caretaker for the last 4 years. Mr. Thomas has not been consistent in the child's life." The judge tapped his pen on the desk. "Still, a child needs a father, and the mother clearly has her hands full." He let out a small laugh and shook his head. "This sounds like someone who might be overwhelmed. Maybe shared custody would help her." Sarah's eyes widened, but she kept quiet. Her lawyer looked frustrated but didn't interrupt. Rick smirked a little. He looked too relaxed, like he thought things were already going his way. The judge looked at Sarah again. "You say you're able to care for the child full-time, but you're barely staying above water. Tell me, Miss Lopez, do you even have time to be a mother?" Sarah's cheeks turned red, but not from embarrassment, from anger. She kept her voice calm. "Yes, Your Honor, I work hard, but I make time for my son. Every night, I cook for him, help him with his reading, play with him. He's my world." The judge seemed unimpressed. "That's what all parents say." There was a long pause. The judge scribbled something down, then looked over at Rick. "And you, Mr. Thomas, what's your current job?" "I'm between jobs," Rick said quickly. "But I'm getting back on my feet. I want to be a part of my son's life. I deserve that chance." The judge nodded slowly, then looked back at Sarah. It's important for a child to have balance, a father and a mother. I'm not sure your schedule is good for a young boy. Sarah felt like she had been slapped. She had come here hoping to be heard, but all she heard now was judgment. Not for being a bad parent, but for being a single mother trying her best. Her lawyer stepped forward. With all due respect, Your Honor, Miss Lopez has made every sacrifice to raise her son alone, and as Mr. Thomas has not even made regular contact. The judge waved his hand. Yes, I'm just saying let's not pretend one person can do the job of two. Sarah clenched her hands. Her nails dug into her palms. She didn't want to cry, not in front of them, not when they saw her as weak. She had faced worse than this. She had worn combat boots and carried gear in the desert heat. She had stayed calm under gunfire. But now she felt like she was fighting a different kind of war, and the battlefield was a courtroom that didn't see her strength. Rick cleared his throat and stepped forward when the judge nodded at him. Your Honor, he began smoothly. I've made mistakes. I'm not going to pretend I've been the perfect dad. But I've changed. I want to be in my son's life. He needs me. Sarah didn't move, but her jaw tightened. She had heard these words before. From Rick, from other people who didn't stick around. Rick went on. I think Danny would do better if he had a father figure around. Boys need someone to teach them how to be men. And I'm worried. I mean, no offense to Sarah, but I don't think she's stable right now. The judge raised his eyebrow. What do you mean by that? Rick shrugged, but his voice turned sharp. She's emotional. She gets overwhelmed. She works too much. That's not good for a little kid. And she used to be in the military, but she quit. Couldn't handle it, I guess. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. That wasn't true. She hadn't quit. She had served her full term and came home when her service ended, because Danny needed her. Rick kept talking. She's tough, yeah, but sometimes that toughness becomes coldness. She doesn't let anyone help her. And she never lets me see Danny, even when I ask. Sarah's lawyer quickly stepped in. Your Honor, Mr. Thomas hasn't visited his son in over a year. He hasn't paid support, and he didn't even attend Danny's last birthday. Rick raised his hands. I've had problems. I've been trying to get my life together, but now I'm ready. I can be a father. The judge looked down at his notes and scribbled something. Sarah felt heat rising in her chest. The lies, the calm way Rick said them. It stung. He made it sound like she was cold and careless, like she had broken instead of sacrificed. She had kept their son fed and loved while Rick disappeared. But none of that seemed to matter right now. The judge hadn't even looked at her since Rick started talking. She swallowed hard and stared at the table. She had told the truth. Rick had told stories. And yet the judge seemed to be listening to him. The judge turned his eyes to Sarah again. Miss Lopez, do you have anything to say in response? Sarah stood. Her knees felt a little weak, but she held her back straight. Her lawyer gave her a small nod. She looked directly at the judge. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to speak for myself. The judge motioned for her to go on. I didn't quit the military, she said clearly. I served 6 years in the U.S. Army. I completed my contract. I came home when my duty was done, because I had a bigger duty waiting for me. My son. She paused. The courtroom was silent. When Rick left, Danny was barely talking. He still wore diapers. I was the one who potty trained him. I was the one who stayed up with him when he had a fever. I read to him every night. I packed his lunches. I showed up at every teacher meeting. I worked morning shifts at the grocery store and night shifts at the gas station just to pay rent. And I still found time to help him with his homework. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. Yes, I'm tired. Yes, I struggle. But I never let that stop me from being there for my son. I don't take breaks from being a mom. She glanced at Rick, then looked back at the judge. Rick says I'm cold. I'm not. I'm strong. There's a difference. I don't cry in front of my son because I want him to feel safe. I don't let him hear me worry because I want him to believe everything will be okay. She looked down for a second and swallowed. There were nights I went to bed hungry so Danny could have enough. I never told him, because that's what love is. The judge's pen stopped moving. Sarah took a deep breath. Rick didn't come to birthdays. He didn't call. He didn't send money. Now he says he's ready. But being a parent doesn't start when it's easy. It starts when it's hard. and you show up anyway. The judge leaned back in his chair and looked at her closely now. Not just like a name on paper, like a person. Sarah looked down at her hands. She hated that they were shaking. She hated feeling judged when she had done nothing but fight for her child every day since the moment he was born. Her lawyer placed a hand gently on her arm, letting her know she'd done well. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Lopez, he said slowly. You say you served in the army. She nodded. He raised an eyebrow. And you left honorably. Yes, sir. He tapped his pen on the desk again, but said nothing more. Sarah sat down, her heart still pounding. She had said everything she needed to say. Now it was up to the court to see her for who she really was. Not just a single mother, but a soldier, a protector, and most of all, a mother who never gave up. The room stayed quiet after Sarah finished speaking. Rick shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge tapped his pen again, slower this time. He glanced down at the papers on his desk, then looked back up at Sarah. You say you served for 6 years. The judge said. Do you have any proof of that with you today? Sarah reached into her purse. Her fingers brushed past her wallet, keys and Danny's crumpled drawing of a robot, until she found what she was looking for. She gently pulled out a small leather case and opened it. Inside was her military badge. She stood and walked to the clerk's table. Her heels clicked on the floor, loud in the quiet room. She placed the badge down with both hands. The judge leaned forward and picked it up. His eyebrows lifted as he read the name, rank and details. Sergeant Lopez, he read out loud. Army Commendation Medal. 2 overseas deployments. He blinked, then looked at her again. You earned this? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah said softly. I led a team during my last deployment. I received that medal for helping protect civilians during an attack. The judge didn't speak right away. He stared at the badge, then slowly set it down with care. It was the first time all morning that he seemed unsure. Rick's face was pale. His eyes were locked on the badge, like he couldn't believe it was real. Sarah sat down again, her heart thudding hard in her chest. She hadn't planned to show the badge. She never used it to win anything. But today, it wasn't about pride. It was about truth. For once, someone had to see that she was more than just tired eyes and a tight budget. She was more than a struggling mom. She had been a leader, a fighter, and still was. The judge cleared his throat and sat straighter in his chair. His tone changed just slightly, but enough for everyone to notice. Thank you for your service, Sergeant Lopez, he said quietly. Sarah gave a small nod. Thank you, Your Honor. For the first time since she stepped into the courtroom, she felt like someone had actually seen her. The judge rested his hands on the bench and looked thoughtfully at Sarah. Sergeant, he said again, slower this time. I didn't expect that. Sarah didn't respond. She simply sat still, her badge back in its case, resting on the table like it belonged there all along. The judge glanced down at his notes, then up at her again. His voice had softened. You led a team, you said. Yes, sir, she replied. 4 soldiers. I was responsible for their safety and success. We completed our missions together. He nodded. That takes leadership and strength. Sarah simply nodded back. The judge looked toward Rick, then back to Sarah. And when your term ended, you returned home to care for your son. You've been raising him on your own ever since. Yes, she said. He leaned back in his chair. A different kind of battlefield, he said, half to himself. Her lawyer let out a quiet breath. I may have been too quick to judge earlier, the man said, more carefully now. It's easy to assume what people can or can't handle, based on how they look, or how tired they seem. Rick shifted in his seat again, no longer smiling. The judge looked Sarah in the eyes. But strength doesn't always look the same. You've been carrying more than most people ever will. Sarah's hands were still now. No more shaking, no more twisting. For the first time she didn't feel invisible. The judge looked down at the papers once more, then set his pen aside. Thank you for showing me the full picture. Sarah gave a quiet, respectful nod, and for the first time all day, the silence in the courtroom felt peaceful, not heavy. The judge sat for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk, as he looked over everything in front of him. Rick shifted in his chair, glancing nervously at Sarah and her lawyer. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. After reviewing everything, he began, his voice steady. I've come to a decision. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She sat perfectly still, her breath shallow but controlled. The judge looked directly at Sarah, then at Rick. The evidence suggests that Miss Lopez has been an exceptional parent, despite the challenges she's faced. The court also acknowledges the service and sacrifices she's made as a member of the U.S. Army. It is clear she has shown great responsibility and love for her son. He paused, his gaze moving between the two of them. Therefore, I'm awarding full custody to Miss Lopez. The child will remain with his mother, where he has been cared for and loved. Sarah's heart soared. It felt like a weight was lifted off her chest. Rick's face went pale, and for the first time he didn't seem to have an answer. Sarah felt her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. She turned, her eyes meeting her son's picture in her purse, imagining how it would feel to hold Danny again. As Sarah walked out of the courtroom, her legs felt lighter than they had all day. Her son Danny wasn't there yet, but she could already imagine him running to her with his bright smile. She stepped into the sunlight, feeling a quiet victory settle in her chest. For once she wasn't just a tired mom. She was a soldier, a mother, and a fighter. Mom, a soft voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Danny's picture in her mind come to life, and she smiled, her heart full. You're my hero, Mom, he said with a grin. And in that moment, Sarah knew she had won more than a battle. She had won her son's future. If you enjoyed Sarah's journey and the powerful message of resilience, strength, and love, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Subscribe for more inspiring stories, and stay tuned for more tales of courage and determination. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.